Our first lesson for this day can be found in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 1 through 6. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around. They all gather together. They come to you. Your son shall come from far away, and your daughter shall be carried on their nurse's arms. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels shall cover you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall proclaim the glory of the Lord.
Our gospel lesson this day comes to us from the book of Matthew, there in the 2nd chapter, beginning at the 1st verse. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and we have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem was frightened with him. Calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, Herod inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. The advisors told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come forth a ruler who is shepherd to my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go, search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I too may go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped o'er the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they presented him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own countries by another road. So end our lessons for this day. The wonder of the scriptures, the glory of Epiphany, the fun of marriage, of life, of faith, is that you can do it the way in which it's described. You can take it at face value and it's good. But you can read scripture in light of other scripture. You can experience life with greater and greater experiences. You can live your marriage and come to know deeper and deeper levels of love that you didn't know originally. We've done all the right things. Back in early December, on the day of the pageant, we elected new elders and deacons. On the 24th of December, we sang Silent Night. We've now received communion. We've asked the constitutional questions, and they got all the answers right. They knelt down, and we've prayed upon them, and now we're ready to go. Everything is prepared. All is ready. We're ready for work. If we were a 501c3 charitable nonprofit, that would be true. But the reality is that we explore deeper and deeper levels of faith every night of our lives, every meeting, every act of ministry. Over and over throughout our lives, we come deeper and deeper in faith. When the minister says to you, "You may now kiss each other," and ask the witnesses to sign their names on the license, you're married. You can inherit everything from the other, and you can consummate your love. But how much more rich and deep and beautiful that marriage is after the years of struggle and coming to know each other and care for each other as companions in life. When the minister takes the baby in their arms, or the new believer kneels down and 3 times places their hand in the water and places it upon their forehead, they are baptized. But how much deeper our faith when we live out the questions of life, when we struggle with, "So it wasn't happily ever after. Life wasn't all easy. And I still believe." How do I believe in the midst of these struggles? The wise men followed Isaiah's text. They followed the star. It was like following a treasure map, and they got to Jerusalem, that was the place indicated by the Old Testament. And they asked of Herod, "So where's the new king? Where is the Messiah born of God, whom we've come to worship?" And Herod didn't know. And all the people in the community didn't know. It's like having a treasure map in which the place marked with the X is ripped off of the map. You don't know where to go to. They'd missed the place by 9 or 10 miles. The wise consulted the sages, and they said, "You're looking at the wrong text. You can't read just one biblical passage. You need to understand that they've come from far distant lands and have come to the nation of Israel. They've come to the land, they've come to the people, they've come to God, but the exact location is not in Isaiah. You need another text. Instead, it's in the book of Micah, there in the 5th chapter and the 2nd to 4th verses. "You, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, Bethlehem of Judea, from you shall come forth for me the one who is to rule Israel, whose origin is of old." They needed both pieces to find out not just the geographic area, but the specific place. The Catholic theologian Ray Brown was one of my professors at Union Seminary, one of the most beloved of professors. Ray Brown described that when Matthew wrote this story of the infancy of Jesus, what he did was to draw the lines with a pencil for what the infancy looked like. And over time, the church has colored in all the spaces in between. We've filled out the gospel. We haven't changed it. We've used the pieces there and interpreted it to be more full. The early church understood that there were 3 gifts: gold and frankincense and myrrh. We don't know how many wise men there actually were, but because there were 3 gifts, we assumed 3 wise men. And these, over time, came to have identity. The oldest of nations, the oldest of cultures, seemed to be in the Eastern Orient. And so one of the wise men, the oldest among them, was named Caspar. And Caspar came from the Orient, far, far away. One came from Africa. His name was Balthazar. And Balthazar was middle-aged. One came from Europe, from the countries that had just established empires, and so they named this youth Melchior. And those became the names and identities of these three kings who came together. What their actual names were, where they actually came from, how old they were, we don't know. We bring to the text our interpretations. We fill it out, and it becomes more full. So also with our lives, we come to understand more richly by the experience and by sharing together in the community of faith. None of us can have faith alone. You can't celebrate communion by yourself. Who are you going to commune with? You can't be the church unto yourself. There may come leaders among us who have great wisdom and insight for where we should go, but individually, we can't do it. We need to listen to one another and share with one another and come to understand a depth we didn't before imagine. When the Magi came from the east and came to Jerusalem, they sought out the capital city, the capital at Jerusalem, for this was the city of David. But the text from Micah does not describe a great and powerful city of wealth and urbanization. Instead, Micah is a prophet of the poor, a prophet of the rural communities who speaks for the land and the people of the land. We need to understand that this was a culture that had been at war for as long as anybody could remember. What Micah is looking to, what the wise men were following, was a poem from long, long ago, from the time 500, maybe 700 years before Jesus, that described that there will come a time in which your cities will be bombed out. The concentric stone walls around Jerusalem were destroyed and knocked down, and Egypt and Babylon came and invaded. Today we look to Afghanistan and Iraq as being the places of Assyria and Babylon. And the city at Jerusalem had been destroyed. Its minarets, its towers, its palaces, its temple, all lay in rubble. We've seen photos of what Afghanistan and Iraq look like today after years of bombing. That was what Jerusalem looked like at this time. And the passage that comes in Isaiah, this ancient poem that was lifted up, is of a prophet who envisions a time far, far in the future. Yes, there was a time in which everything was great and glorious, in which the temple at Solomon was built and everything was majestic and wonderful. But it's hard to live in a time when the economy stinks. It's hard to live in a time in which there are no tall skyscrapers, but instead everything around you is bombed out rubble. It's hard to have hope when you live in depression. And this poem described a time that would come in which visitors would come from far distant lands and flock to Jerusalem. They would come with your dispersed children, now grown up, who'd experienced cultures in far-off places. But a question arises for Isaiah. What will happen when we have two different populations, two people who don't agree? We have one who has seen the world and embraced other cultures and other dreams and hopes and economies. They come with great wealth and great power. And we have those who have fought to survive. We have those who have stayed here and endured and fought for these values and these dreams. Which one are going to give up their hopes? Which one are going to give up their dreams? For the last many years, as long as I can remember in America, we've had at least two different cultures who've been at war with each other, trying to dominate, trying to win, trying to undo what the others had done. What Isaiah envisions is a time yet to come where one will not dominate the other, one will not oppress the other, but instead, that those who are here will appreciate the cultures and ideas that come from afar that they'd never before imagined. That those who come from far distant places would embrace and hold dear the traditions of those who have fought to survive, and both would dwell together. Matthew didn't create out of nothing the vision of wise men from the east. He captured it from this passage in Isaiah 60, "Arise, shine, for your light has come." The image in Matthew and in Isaiah is not of a star that guides them. Instead, it's a glory, an aura all around us. It's as if we've been dwelling in a dark ages for as long as anybody can remember. We've been dwelling in several times 50 shades of gray and hopelessness and depression. Does anybody see a way out of the wars that we've been part of the struggles and the hopelessness and depression? Instead, what will come is a glory from God that provides an illumination, a hope, a dreams that tickle your heart, that fill you with imagination and possibilities that you never before believed could be. Instead of our trying to get our way, instead of our believing that we're ready to do the work ourselves, we need to remember what the elders and deacons did and ministers each have done in our kneeling down to listen and to pray and to meditate and consider, and having heard the wisdom of others, then to act together in communion. I recall when Mario was ordained here a little over 3 years ago. I recall when I was ordained over 33 years ago. That was in a cathedral-style church with a slate floor. And a friend from seminary walked up the aisle in high stilettos. And you could hear her heels click. It was a time different than we embrace today. It was when women were first being ordained into the ministry in the church. And it was like a breath of fresh air that we would hear all the leaders don't have to be the same, but instead there are possibilities all around us. This church, for as long as we can remember, has embraced having youth elders and youth deacons. Suddenly, we have at least 3 of our deacons who are under 30 and yet are not youth. These are adults in the congregation who live in this community and have taken on the roles of leadership alongside of those of us more advanced in years. And from each other, we learn wisdom and insight. Among all those questions that we asked of the elders and deacons that were asked of us as ministers as well, the one that I think is perhaps the most important of all is, will you seek to have energy, intelligence, imagination, and love? There come times when session meetings go long, and it's hard to have energy and to be renewed by the fellowship, by the Spirit. There are times when we have not acted with intelligence, much as we've tried. And to seek ideas from outside would be helpful. To act with love and compassion. But I think perhaps the greatest of all is that you would seek to have imagination. We live in a time in which we need to color outside the lines, in which we need to melt down the crayons and seek other purposes for them. For the faith is not simply as it was long ago as pure texts, but instead one interpreting another. Our marriages, our lives, our faith, our nation being interpreted by ever new experiences held up against each other. The future is bright. It's no longer going to be as it always was in the past. But we are ready for the work.